All right, what do you have now? A few more. 4 more questions. Okay, it's all done the exact same way. First thing you do is you draw it. Now this is negative, so we'll go negative 90, negative 180, negative 270, negative 360. So negative 300 lies somewhere in between. So that's negative 300. Again, negative 300, not on my chart. Nothing negative is on my chart. Reference angles. Reference angles are always positive things, positive angles. So the gap in between there is 60. So my reference angle is 60 degrees. I'm looking at sine. So I go over to my chart. Sine of 60 is right there, root 3 over 2. So again, this is no different. Just root 3 over 2, and then you do the cast rule. Whoops, I was doing that. I'm thinking green. C-A-S-T. I am in the A quadrant where all of them are positive, so it doesn't really matter. Mine is positive because all of them, sine, cosine, and tangent, are positive. Okay, cos of 690. That's the next one. 690. Now, I actually don't know what 690 is, so I'm going to subtract 360 from that. So if I subtract 360 from that, I think I get 330. So these are coterminal, meaning I don't really need to answer this. I can answer 330 because that lands in the exact same spot. So whatever answer I get for this, I'll just throw on up there. Cos of 330. This is 270. This is 360. 330 is right here. The gap in between is my reference. This gap is 30, so my reference angle, the angle I'm referring to, is going to be 30. So instead of cos 690, instead of cos 330, I'm going to just look at the 30. The reference angle, so cos of 30, so here's 30. It's root 3 over 2. So I'll just write it down, root 3 over 2. And then, as I always do, the cast rule. I'm in the C quadrant. I happen to have a cosine. So again, C quadrant, only cosine is positive. I happen to have a cosine, so that is my answer. So then I just copy that up to here. My answer is positive root 3 over 2. Moving on. Cosecant. Now this one is the first time it's different. Now cosecant is actually the reciprocal or the flip of sine. So what I'm going to do is first do sine of 330. So if you look over here, secant will be the reciprocal or flip of cosine of whatever the angle is. So it just has one extra step. It's really not that any more difficult. So cosecant again, haven't seen that, but whatever, 330. So here I am at 330, 270, 360, 330 is right here. 330 is not on my chart, so I have to get a reference angle. That gap is 30 degrees, so my reference angle is 30 degrees. Now what am I looking for? Well, cosecant is the flip of sine, so I'm going to look at sine, and I'm going to use my reference angle 30. So I'm looking at sine and 30. So where is it? 30 degrees. Sine is on the right. Okay, so a half. So I get a half. And then I have the cast rule, C-A-S-T. I am in the cosine quadrant. So only cosine is positive. I do not have a cosine, I have a sine. So there's my answer. It has to be negative a half. Now it's not actually my answer. That's the answer to the sine 330. All the cosecant 330 does mean is that we have to just flip the fraction. So negative 2 over 1. Or you can just write negative 2. So that's the extra step that you have to do. Again, to recap, 330, not on the chart. So I graph 330, look at the reference angle. My reference angle is 30. Now I got to go to my actual, the graph that I had to memorize. And I'm not looking for cosecant because that's nowhere on the graph. I'm looking for sine. So sine of the 30 is a half. I use the cast rule to find out that it's negative. And then because it's not sine, it's actually cosecant, I flip that fraction. And that's all there is to it. Which might seem like a lot, and I guess it is. So this is 180, this is 90. I need to go 135. It's actually going to be halfway in between. 130 is not on my chart, so instead I find a reference angle of what is it, 45 degrees. So my reference angle here is 45 degrees. Now it says secant. Secant's not on my chart, but secant is the flip of cosine. So I'm going to look at 45 degrees and cosine. And if you look at the chart, you'll find that it is root 2 over 2. Next, I need to do the cast rule, C-A-S-T. I am in the sine quadrant. I don't have sine, so I'm going to make mine negative. Now that I have that, secant is the flip of this, so I'll just flip it over. Negative 2 over the square root of 2. Now that's technically not the nicest answer because we don't want that square root on the bottom. So what I'll do is I'll times by the denominator, which is root 2. So on the top, I've got an outside number of negative 2 and an inside number of 2. And the bottom I have the square root of 4. Now the square root of 4 on the bottom here is just 2. And then these 2's can cancel out. So I have negative root 2 as my answer. That looks like garbage. I'll try to do a little bit nicer. Okay, to recap, secant of 135. Secant's not even on my chart, so it's the flip of cosine. So, okay, I'll find cosine. 135 is on my chart. So I graph it, I find a reference angle of 45. Cosine of 45 is root 2 over 2. Then I use the cast rule, find out that this thing is negative. Now it's not asking for cos, I was actually asking for the flip of it, so I flipped the fraction. Normally I'd be done, however there is a square root on the bottom, so I multiply the top and bottom by root 2. So the bottom is going to be root 4, and then the bottom square root of 4 is just 2. And the top, the outside number is a 2, the inside number is a 2, so we can't mix them. And then these 2's can cancel out. Okay, so we've got one more section to do, and that'll probably be a couple videos. And it's essentially working backwards. So we'll do that in a moment.